My name's Alan Carter, and this is my debut crime novel, Prime Cut. It's set on the south coast of WA, a place called Hopetoun, and it's against the backdrop of the mining boom, and it kind of looks at the underbelly of the mining boom. And it's been nominated, shortlisted for Best First Fiction with the Ned Kelly Awards for crime writing, along with David's book, so we're in very good company.
Yeah, and this is my debut crime novel as well. It's my second novel, but my first crime novel. And this is set mostly in Northbridge and Fremantle. It's set in 1975. It's based on probably Perth's most notorious unsolved murder, the murder of Shirley Finn in 1975. So it's based on solid research, but it is a work of fiction. It's written with a sense of affection for Perth, but it's set in a particular time, 1975. Things were quite different. So one of the great things about it was the research that I did for it. Dozens and dozens of interviews with people, ex-policemen and prostitutes, etc. from the time. So I was quite young when Shirley Finn was murdered, so it was interesting to go and talk to those people. It gave me quite a different picture of the Perth than the one I had become accustomed to.
I've been an avid crime reader for a good 15, 20 years, and I really enjoy crime. And crime is a very popular genre. You'll see in the shops that have their own sections to it. It's a big seller. That's one attraction, to get into something that does sell. But I think I also like crime because most crime novels entail all of those basic human failings to do with, lust, betrayal, guilt, ambition, all of the dark side of what we do. And I think people in reading that recognise there might be a bit of that in themselves, but they also read crime, I think, in the hope, even if it might be lots of grey areas and lots of... I think people want their crime to have some kind of structure attached to it. The real world is not like crime fiction. The bad guys get away, but in fiction you're able to kind of resolve it in some way and bring it all home to roost, which I think people crave that in some ways when they are reading that stuff. But I think they really like to have the kind of protagonists that you find in crime are usually pretty dysfunctional in some way and more interesting characters as well.
I come from more of a lit fiction writing background, and I found working with the genre to be great fun. It's despite the subject matter. There's a kind of a sense of tone. There are kind of the reader's expectations. But I mean, good crime fiction can be very entertaining, can be quite plot-driven, but can also say something quite interesting about the society in which it's set. And so I guess that's something I've tried to do as well.
The female cop in the book is pretty well... I channeled my wife for her character, and the foul-mouthed boss of the protagonist, D.I. McHutchins, he's a kind of a channeling of a composite of my 5 foul-mouthed brothers-in-law. And I suppose what many crime writers tend to do is they make their hero kind of a version of themselves, maybe a bit taller, bit thinner, and a bit younger. I did that as well, but he's also Chinese.
One of my characters is an old judge in his 70s. He's probably a bit more morally righteous than I am, and there's the main character who's as Alan said before, he's a classic kind of crime fiction protagonist, or the very flawed central character, very conflicted. He's based on a couple of real West Australian police whistleblowers, and then there's a third character who's entirely fictionalised. He's nothing like me, but strangely enough, he's entirely fictionalised. He was the most enjoyable for me to write. So the further you get from yourself, I think, is the more enjoyable.
There are precious few kind of true heroes out there. Most people do have the capability to be a whole bunch of different things at the same time, and life is complicated like that. And I think the characters that I write should also reflect that too. I think we're all capable of, theoretically capable of terrible things, but luckily most of us step back from the brink. But for those who don't, that's where the hero comes in.
There's an old saying, in fiction only trouble is interesting, and I mean good, well-balanced people by and large don't make it into works of fiction, whether it's crime fiction or any kind of fiction, because they're basically not that interesting, perhaps as in real life, as in fiction. Whereas your flawed, conflicted central character, I mean, in good crime fiction, as in all good fiction, character generates its own plot. So people who are a bit like that, they tend to get into situations or into trouble, and that in turn generates suspense and what have you. So they're useful vehicles for generating story, I think.
There's a lot of people who get kind of caught up in, almost paralysed by the fear of not being good enough or not being able to write. And I think the best thing is to kind of just to get on with it and go for it and try and enjoy it. The second thing is also to read. Read what it is that you would like, the kind of thing that you would like to write. Read lots of that.
Just to add to what Alan said, there's another old fiction saying from Raymond Chandler, another great crime writer, analyse and imitate, no other school is necessary. So doing it and reading as much as possible and trying to learn from what people who've gone before you have done and sticking with it is the way to do it.
WA in particular this year, it's been really punching above its weight in terms of recognition of the writers in the state. They've been getting shortlisted and winning awards left, right and centre. Kim Scott, Stephen Daisley. We're doing really well out there this year, and there's definitely community. There are all sorts of festivals and gatherings on where we meet each other, and I think it's good to be talking to other people about, because it's a very isolated business. You're often just in your own little room and in your own head, and so to meet other weirdos like yourself, it's very self-affirming.
That's very true, and that's how I find it as well. Yeah, the community is just small enough to be quite intimate and supportive, and large enough too, so that there's a varied group of people. But yeah, I find it to be a good community.